Greetings internet, it's Katie, and as you guys can tell, I am not in front of the camera today purely because today is the day that I'm finally showing you guys my travel journal, which has been so highly requested. You guys ask me nearly every Instagram post, every video, Katie, can you show us a glimpse of your travel journal? So today is the day I'm gonna show you guys my little black book, not that kind of black book, which basically has drawings, doodles, little written passages about my time. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not an artist. I'm not, you know, by any means a trained artist. So this is all kind of just all over the place, across the board, just whatever I wanted to write, I wrote. So let's dive on in. The journal itself is from Tiger, which is a craft store that I think they have several locations, like a lot of locations throughout Europe. Several locations in Florence, which is where I was. I was in Florence, Italy. So this journal was like €5 or €6. Probably the crown jewel of Florence, Italy is the Duomo, which is the Cathedral Santa Maria, or Il Duomo di Firenze. And I could see the Duomo. I was so lucky I could see it from my window. I would walk past it on my way to class and just be in awe. It was gorgeous. And then I just have like little phrases scattered throughout this entire journal that are in Italian because I was learning Italian in tandem with my other classes while I was abroad. So this is a phrase, che sarà sarà, which means what will be will be. I'd say that was kind of like my motto throughout the entire trip, you know, like when things happen, when you travel, shit happens. So you kind of just have to look at it like what will be will be. What happens happens. I also drew the symbol of Florence, which is the iris. Then I have this John Lennon quote, which was translated into Italian, which basically says everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And this is actually pretty symbolic considering my apartment in Florence got broken into the second week. So I just thought this is a pretty good introductory page. Like, you know, things happen, but life goes on. So that's the first page. And the second page, I did a little bit more writing about the Duomo because I was literally so in awe of it. This is another section of the Duomo, and this is kind of like the color scheme. I sat outside in a little corner cafe and drew this. Here's just a written section about something I learned in one of my classes about the Duomo, which basically was that the initial architect that designed the Duomo building wasn't alive to see the final product, which I think is so remarkable. Like, how could you know, devote your life to a work that you never saw the finished product of? You know, that would like absolutely drive me crazy. So I wrote about that here. If you turn the page, then I have this whole section on my room in Florence. This is what it looked like. We had this gorgeous marble fireplace that wasn't working, but it was still pretty nonetheless. We had this like random bust of some lady we don't know. So our beds were like back here somewhere. And when you lay in your bed, this is what you see, like my bed at least. It was this really creepy man. So his name was Marcello, our landlord told us. He like was the initial owner of the building. He had these pictures hanging on our wall of like different portraits of Florence. They were all crooked and it really drove me crazy. Then the next page, okay, so this part obviously was when I went to Venice, as you guys can probably tell. But this side was just this random, like, I don't even know what possessed me to draw this. The whole abroad experience for me was such a soul-searching like journey. So I really learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about what makes me happy. And the first one, I love like lingerie. I love buying things like, you know, really nice like night sleepwear because I think sleep is like the most important thing in life. And so if you go to bed feeling sexy or wake up feeling sexy, nice big cup of coffee. I had a new appreciation for coffee abroad because Italian coffee is so different than other coffee. So I wrote some ideas for a video I was making. I just wanted this journal to be very like haphazard, like whatever I wanted to write. There's me in the gondola. Next we have this spread, which is one of my favorite ones that I've ever made in this whole journal. I drew this on the bus ride home from one of our trips. We went to Cinque Terre, which I always say that wrong, but it's basically like 5 little miniature towns on like the coast of Italy. And it was a beach type town. It was gorgeous. They're famous for their focaccia bread and pesto. And then we also went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which I drew here. And it actually poured. It poured rain at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And it was like probably the worst day ever. When we actually got to the Leaning Tower, it was gorgeous, but the entire day was like one of those nightmares, like just horrible. Then I also went to the coast of Positano, which is the Amalfi Coast of Italy. And then we went to the ruins of Pompeii, which was so insane. I absolutely lived for Pompeii. That was the most eye-opening experience of my life. I hiked Mount Vesuvius. It was crazy. Then here's the next spread. There's actually this place called the Gucci Museum. The museum has a cafe attached to it, so I would always go to the cafe for homework stuff, and then I went to the museum a few times. This was the view from my window, actually. I was sitting in my window drawing this My mom got very upset at me for sitting in the window, but this was the view. Basically, there was this, it was kind of like the equivalent of like a cleaner's. So I would see people in these windows like mending clothes all the time. And then below was a shoe store. The Duomo was like back here kind of. If you go into a different window in my house, you could see it, but this is a cafe that I always went to. We went to a wine tasting, and this is just the brochure from that. We went to Tenuta Torciano. It was in Tuscany somewhere. Then this is my page, my very scattered, kind of like my least favorite page in this entire book, from Munich when I went to Oktoberfest. So I drew a stein. I put in here the receipt from one of our restaurants we went to there that was literally the best food I've ever eaten in my life. So I glued it in here so I can maybe go back sometime. This is part of the brochure from one of the concentration camps that we visited there. I went to Oktoberfest and then I wanted to, kind of ground myself. Went to a concentration camp. I sobbed. It was the saddest, most eye-opening thing I've ever been to. Here's a little bit more about Oktoberfest. I just kind of wrote about the experience. This was my outfit. I drew a pretzel, 2 more steins, Prost, which is like one of their famous sayings in Munich. So I wrote this side on the way back from Munich. So I was in the clouds, somewhere above Europe, drawing this. This side I added later on because I had a blank page, but I basically put a David postcard. Michelangelo's David. It was the most gorgeous piece of artwork I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. The sculpture itself is 14 feet tall, which was insane. He's literally the most gorgeous human I've ever seen. I kind of want to date him. But back to this page, back in September, I basically was just writing random thoughts that came to my head. You are a compilation of everything that you've been through. The good, the bad, the heartbreaking, the embarrassing, every single thing, every butterfly you felt. I heard this quote in a song I was listening to, I think, that says, "The hard times put the shine into the diamond," which was kind of a mantra for me while I was abroad. The next page, I wrote about this little paper shop that I encountered when I was abroad. It was right down the street from my school, and it was called Il Papiro. I would go in there all the time and get little paper samples, like sheets of paper that they would dye right in front of you. So they did this one right in front of me, and it was gorgeous. It was so cool how they did it. Here I wrote down something that I heard in class in September. It was called Domani è un altro giorno, which means tomorrow is a new day. And my professor said that just out of the blue, and I was like, whoa, that's a beautiful saying. So I wrote it down. I was sitting on the Ponte Vecchio, which is a really gorgeous part of Florence, and I drew the sunset with pastels, and it was such like it looked like an explosion or like a fire. And then I also glued in this postcard that I got, which is an artist rendition of Florence. The sunset over the Arno, which is the river in Florence, is like hands down the best thing I've ever seen. This is another piece of paper from that one shop I was talking about. I was, kind of brainstorming tattoo ideas. I never actually got one. Who knows what the future holds, but I basically was just kind of like collaging just ideas here that I was just thinking of and reading on Tumblr and whatnot. Accidentally got a rip in it, but I tried to make it look strategic. What in your life is calling you? I was very inspired while abroad. Like all these ideas just like fermented in my mind. It was amazing. So a lot of our trips through Italy, you'd be surprised how mountainous it is. I mean, at least I was. I just pictured it being flat ground. So I drew these as we were driving through Padua, Italy. I was brainstorming or thinking about my success and like why other people's success intimidates me. So I wrote that down. Basically, someone else's success doesn't and shouldn't indicate failure in myself. And that's a big thing I try to remind myself of all the time. And I wrote this quote from St. Augustine. "And men go about to wonder at the heights of mountains, and the mighty waves of the seas, and the wide sweeps of rivers, and the circuits of the ocean, and the revolution of the stars, but they consider themselves not." Which was such a monumental quote for me because, you think about all these things, you study all this stuff, but you don't study yourself. Then over here is a little bit of like a written part about this play that I went to see. I went to see this opera. It was like an authentic Italian opera. It was so cool. So I drew one of the characters here. Then here I put like a little excerpt from the, what's it called? The handout that I got during the play. Really cool. It was called The Barber, what was it called? The Barber of Seville. So yeah. Then here I drew another little thing. I think I did this on my birthday actually. Keep creating chapters in your own personal book. Never stop creating and reinventing yourself. Take control of your life and never allow limitations implanted by society to tell you how your music is supposed to sound or how your book is supposed to be written. I was trying to get a better visual of like where everything in Italy is. It's actually in the shape of a boot, if you guys can see. So I drew that. I was staying in Florence, which is right here. Then this page is blank, I don't know why, but I drew this when I was in Greece. I was basically setting goals for myself all throughout my entire journey, so I wrote, how do I expect to change if I'm still living the way that I've always have? Growth is bred from change. Kind of just drew some palm trees, I don't really know why, but then this is a little depiction of Greece. I wrote about our adventures there. We went ATVing, we went on boat tours, we went, you know, all throughout to the white clay houses and everywhere. So this is a little drawing of Oya. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this was probably my favorite part of Greece. It was like the little white houses you see in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. It's not the exact location of Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I know I like kind of researched it, but it looks a lot like that if you've seen the movie. This is probably one of my favorite parts of my entire abroad experience, was going to the lighthouse on the cliff, which was in Greece, and we basically, you know, ATV'd up to this lighthouse, which is overlooking the water. It was the most gorgeous moment. Oh my god, I was in love. This is actually a smorgasbord of 3 different trips I did. So I went to Paris, Amsterdam, and Barcelona in a pretty short span of time, so I just kind of drew them, lumped them all together. So this was the ramen that we ate in Amsterdam, and it was literally the best ramen I've ever had in my entire life. We ate with chopsticks, obviously. And then the Melon District is where I stayed in Barcelona, because all my friends study there. And it was pretty gross, not gonna lie, but it was pretty cool, you know, it's like a dorm style. Then I went to the Louvre, so here's a little pass from the Louvre, my ticket. And then I drew the Eiffel Tower because we had the opportunity to go at night, which was really cool, up the Eiffel Tower. I highly recommend going at night. And then I just drew some picture frames from the Louvre. And yeah. So this is one of my outfits that I wore at a vineyard tour that we went on. We went on a lot of vineyard tours, and it was so funny. Everyone wore like very casual outfits, and then I rolled up with this red gown, classic. So I thought I'd draw that. Kind of wrote about basically like dressing well is a form of good manners, Tom Ford quote, classic. Then these were my boots that I wore all throughout Italy and all throughout my travels from Jeffrey Campbell. So I drew those, and then my coup de jour. I know I'm saying that wrong, but it's by Giorgio Armani. Now we're getting to the part where I got a little bit lovesick. It's kind of hard being in all these like glamorous cities because you just see all these couples in love on their honeymoons. So I basically just wrote this little angsty piece about how, you know, I'm so painfully ready to meet my person and I just haven't yet and whatever. But I read this book while I was in my apartment that someone had left there, and it was called A Room with a View. I put in a little excerpt of that and then wrote on top of it this little piece about hearts being wild creatures, and that's probably why our ribs are cages, which was a very like big quote to me that kind of just hit me. I'm like, wow, that's so true, like hearts are wild. So this piece is basically something that I read online from Lang Leave. It's basically talking about how this is my time, like I feel like this is my time for something great to happen, and I won't let anyone take it away from me. It's my rocket fuel, and finally I'm going places. It's kind of like just an inspirational piece that I was like, yes, this is like me. So then over here I drew the Ferris wheel in Amsterdam. So then I also drew this arena that we saw in Verona. I basically brought this journal everywhere with me, and I would just stand like an awkward person like in front of things and just draw them. I spent a weekend in London, a 3-day trip to London, so naturally I drew the telephone booth and this little ball pit from this club I went to. And then last but not least, I was stranded in the Paris airport for 5 hours, so I wrote this little angsty piece about that. And this is a page that I just did last week, which I haven't finished yet, as you guys can tell. I still need to color in the frame here. It's unfinished, but it's basically a little reflection of my time in London last week. So I have a whole video actually going up on that, but yeah, so this is basically the travel journal. So thank you guys so much for watching. Can't wait to fill up the rest of these pages in the future. If you want to know what type of pens that I use, I'll put those in the description box below so you guys can easily pick those up. But otherwise, that's my video. Hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys all later this week. Bye!